Imagine a world where there are no borders between the United States and Mexico. One where citizens of both countries can travel, work, and live freely in a common territory, and all are treated as equals. A place where these two cultures, languages, and economies merge into one nation despite being so different. Will it be a utopia or a nightmare? This possibility has many nuances to discuss. This time we will explore an alternative history where the United States and Mexico merge. Ready to travel to a parallel dimension? Here we go! The current state of Mexico. For many Americans, especially Texans and Southerners, Mexicans, well, Mexico in general, is their greatest enemy. It is simply impossible to put the United States and Mexico in the same sentence without talking about problems. Illegal immigration mainly, we will elaborate on this a little later, but first, we have to answer the following question. How is Mexico doing today? On the economic side, the reality is that Mexico is not doing as badly as you might expect. Mexico's economy is the second largest in Latin America, after Brazil. In 2023, Mexico's GDP was approximately $1.1 trillion. All this is thanks to a combination of manufacturing, services, and primary sectors. But, let's be honest, being one of the best in Latin America is not an impressive achievement when you compete against countries like Argentina, Venezuela, or Peru. Even though by Latin standards, Mexico is doing quite well, it has many other problems and quite serious ones. If it didn't have them, immigration to its northern neighbor would not be so massive. In Mexico, there are simply not the same opportunities offered by countries considered first world, such as our co-protagonist today, the United States. Although education, health, and technology are improving in the country, there are a couple of plagues that prevent it from reaching its full potential. Mexicans simply don't know how to vote. For the past decade, their presidents have been the epitome of mediocrity. But that is not the worst of these plagues, for the biggest problem of this rich nation is its insecurity. If we were to go into detail about the power of gangs and the bad life that exists in Mexico, this video would become unnecessarily long. So let's just pay attention to this graph that shows how security in Mexico has worsened over the years. But to give you an idea of why these two problems are so serious, I'll tell you a little anecdote. A few years ago, the son of one of the most powerful narcos in the nation was captured. So his gang decided to take to the streets to kill innocent people to demand his release. And they succeeded because, in a matter of hours, the president of Mexico released the man in question. Everyone is free to have their own opinion about this event. I invite you to open the debate and comments. And lastly, we have to talk about Mexico's objectives as a nation, which are nothing very specific. Mexico just wants to improve itself, make itself safer, and promote a good lifestyle. Ironic, considering they are not very good at doing that. And for their part, how is the United States doing? In several previous videos, we have already discussed this powerhouse in detail. But again, it's key to have context, so here we go again. Besides offering a great quality of life and being a world power, the USA is a rather unequal country. Healthcare is a sensitive issue. Its society leaves something to be desired in many aspects, and there are areas in many states that are considerably violent. Its main interests are three. It seeks to maintain its national security and protect its interests, but yes, its methods are not the best. It also seeks to promote its economic prosperity and guarantee access to natural resources. And finally, it seeks to promote its democratic and humanist values throughout the world, but again, with somewhat questionable methods. That's it. Time to take a trip to another universe. Are you ready yet? For what reasons and what would it take for the USA and Mexico to merge? If you saw the video of the union of the USA and Canada, you probably think you know what's coming, but the truth, the merger between Mexico and the United States would be not at all similar, it would be different. And why is that? Simple, the United States and Mexico are not equal in any sense of the word. If you have watched our videos so far, you know very well that the USA has its own political, social, and economic problems. It is not a perfect country either. But the facts speak for themselves. Not only Mexicans, most Latinos have the dream to emigrate and live the American dream. The United States is simply in a superior position in many ways. If these two countries were to unite someday, I fully assure you that it would not be a union, it would be an assimilation. It is not in the USA's interest to join with Mexico on an equal footing. Think about it. What does the USA gain from this? More narcos in their territory. That deal would only suit the Mexicans. Now, Mexico and the USA already have a history together with similar events, since in the past the country of the White Eagle has stolen and snatched a good part of its land from poor Mexico. Of course, that happened more than a century ago, and the world has changed a lot since then, so revisiting that history doesn't help us much. In today's world, assimilation of Mexico could only take place with the consent of the Mexican government, and it can only be accomplished in two ways: violence and diplomacy. For now, let's forget about the former, because it's obvious that if a country like the United States did something like that, we would all be in trouble. And don't think it would be because international bodies would intervene. Those things never do anything. The enemies of the USA keep waiting for a little excuse to try to blow up the cradle of America with nuclear weapons. And if just one shoot, all countries will follow, and this hypothetical world would become fallout. It is super obvious, but the diplomatic process of assimilation would need democratic elections and the support of the citizens of both countries, which, again, would be very difficult considering the number of conservatives in the USA. So it is very certain that in this world the campaigns for absorption would lead to civil war. Now, what reasons could the United States have for taking this risk and taking over its neighbor's land? To expand its economy and influence in the region, to strengthen its position in the Western Hemisphere, promote its democratic, liberal values and things we have heard before. Now, with all this information, it is time to dive deeper into this hypothesis. The US gets Mexico. What happens now? After a long process, in which maybe some blood was spilled or not, everything went relatively well. Mexico was assimilated by the United States and belongs to the cradle of America. Now what? Well, first typical changes that we always make clear. The forced merger would give the United States access to a new market of consumers, labor, and natural resources. It would also result in greater influence in the Western Hemisphere, could lead to increased cultural and linguistic diversity in the United States, and even a change in the US political system. To summarize, in an optimistic scenario, Mexico's assimilation could lead to a more peaceful and prosperous world. The two countries could work together to solve common problems, such as poverty, inequality, and climate change. In a pessimistic scenario, absorption could lead to a more divided and conflicted world. Tensions between the two cultures could lead to an increase in nationalism and extremism. But the reality is most likely somewhere in between these two scenarios. What do you think would happen? And come on, we're not done yet, because a lot more would happen. For starters, the United States would become the largest country in the Americas, with an area of more than 9 million square kilometers, and would have borders with Canada, Guatemala, and Belize. Mexico would cease to exist as an independent country and would be divided into several U.S. states or territories, with different levels of autonomy and representation. It would also increase its population by more than 130 million inhabitants, which would make it the second most populated country in the world, second only to China. To this list, we can also add the increase in economic power by incorporating Mexico's natural resources, infrastructure, productive sectors, and markets. As if that were not enough, it would strengthen its political leadership by expanding its influence and control over the American continent and the world. But that also entails an extra challenge, as it would have to deal with the challenges and conflicts that assimilation would imply, such as resistance, violence, corruption, insecurity, and above all drug trafficking. But it is the USA we are talking about, so they could eventually put an end to most of these problems, don't you think? If you want to know more stories and show your support, just subscribe. See you when it's time to explore another world. See you next time.